But before I'm going to talk about the technology, I will have a presentation here about 40 minutes or so. Directly following that, there will be a small break, about 1 minute, and then we'll have a Q&A session. Please, if you have any questions, please post them while I do the presentation, and don't wait to the last minute. So before I go into the talk about the TrackMan technology, I want to share a very big milestone that TrackMan passed here entering 2021. 1 billion. What is 1 billion? Well, 1 billion, that's the number of golf shots that has been recorded with a TrackMan app and has been uploaded to the TrackMan cloud in the history of TrackMan. And that means that when we are talking about, we know how ball flight acts and what creates it, we are now basing that on an ever-increasing number of golf shots. Pretty amazing. I can also share with you that half of these shots has been recorded the last 12 months. So how will it be next year? So, but before I go into the talking about the technology, I want to share you a little bit what a crazy year it has been for TrackMan and for the golf business in general. We've all been hit by this COVID. We have not been able to play on the golf courses like we normally do, but given those circumstances, we actually pulled off some pretty amazing stuff, I think. One of the things we did, and I don't know if you had a chance to follow us while we did this in the spring, together with the European Tour, we created a tournament for tour professionals playing for real money in the BMW Indoor Invitational. So I actually have a little video here showing you a little about how this all came along. So I have a video here, it's about 45 seconds. So watch that, and then I'll be right back.
Welcome to week 4 of the BMW Indoor Invitational. At Valderrama, a Spanish flavor to the marquee group in Rafa Cabrera-Bello and Sergio Garcia.
Yeah, I love Valderrama. Everyone knows, and I've always said it, it's my favorite golf course, and not particularly long, but narrow, dog-legs, trees, small greens. It's really target golf. That's what I love. So I'm excited to see how it goes. It should be a great match.
Great show, high five there.
So we have Rafa and Sergio playing together using Zoom and all the stats from TrackMan. And a big field this week, 39 European Tour players, again, all over the world, and in all sorts of setups, with all sorts of celebrations. See who can take the prize in the BMW Indoor Invitational, powered by TrackMan.
Yeah, so this was the BMW Indoor Invitational. It was 5 tournaments back-to-back every week, prize money every week. And there was actually done a lot of recordings of this. So please go on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, and search for BMW Indoor Invitational. There's a lot of really, really cool moments captured there. I think you got a little bit of a glimpse of that in the video you just saw. Okay, let's talk about TrackMan technology. And the first thing I want to do is explain to you how TrackMan is tracking the golf ball and the club delivery. And one thing before going into the details, I want to, golf is a game of counting strokes. And that means that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do when we are practicing, having technology, recording what we are doing, what we really want to do is to be better at playing real golf. The closest things that comes to playing real golf is to be able to control where you are landing the ball, both in distance as well as a left-right. And that's why it has always been a TrackMan mantra to track the ball flight all the way, if at all possible. There's no substitute for knowing where the ball actually ends up, instead of just predicting from the launch conditions, if at all possible. And we have that in all of our products, whether that being a TrackMan 4 or TrackMan 3E or TrackMan 2. Yes, they are still alive out there and working, even though they are 15 years old. So this is from TPS. And you can see, as an example here, the last data point on this drive from Bruce Koepka is 270 78 yards tracked. So basically entire ball flight tracked. We do the same thing in the TrackMan range product, where we basically track all shots on the range and track it from all the base, all the way from launch to landing. The same thing happens on our broadcast product, where you look at tracers or just looking at stats. They're all tracked all the way. Again, that is a key thing. If whenever possible, track the ball all the way. But there are situations when the full ball flight is not available, like we had with the BMW Indoor Invitational, where golf courses were locked, where we couldn't play real golf. So what is the next best thing you can do then? Well, if you are forced to hitting into a net indoor solution, indoor golf, you are relying on a ball flight modeling. Because you can only, reality stops after 8-10 feet of ball flight, so you have to predict what's happening after that. TrackMan has the luxury of having recorded all these 1 billion golf shots, not all of them outdoors, but and that has given us an in-depth insight into the aerodynamics of the ball. And that's why I can state that we actually have the most accurate ball flight model in the world. Of course, we are taking advantage of using that when we have the indoor or hitting into a screen type of environment. It's, by the way, something that the aerodynamics we found out and have updated that during 2020, and that was because that one thing is that the balls are always being improved, the aerodynamics, but the second thing was actually that the players, the speed and spins they generated were actually in an area where they're basically creating more speed and spin in that combination, and we needed to update the aerodynamics model for that purpose. When you are indoors and have to predict the ball flight, then it's absolutely critical that the launch conditions are measured extremely accurately, because you can easily imagine that any error in the initial launch conditions, how that will magnify once you go downrange. So super critical to have accurate measurements of especially the ball launch data in order to be able to predict what would this golf shot have done had it had the opportunity to fly all the way and not be interrupted by a screen or a net 10 feet in front of it. We also have something that is called normalization, which is actually something you typically use when you're outdoors. And I want to explain to you what that is, because that's somewhat of a bridge between indoor and outdoor. What the normalization feature of TrackMan is that it basically takes your ball launch conditions, so that is the ball speed, the launch angle, the launch direction, the spin rate, and the spin axis, and then it plays through this aerodynamic model that I talked about before. And then you apply some settings with temperature and altitude. At the end of the day, what this tells us is what is the density of the air, because the ball will behave differently, even for the same launch conditions, depending on what the temperature and the altitude is. And then we also do what we refer to as ball conversion, because if you are, and this is typically used when you're on a driving range where you do not have a premium ball, and when you hit those balls that the spin rate you are getting, the speed you are getting, and actually also the launch angle would not have been the same had you hit a premium ball. But in the TrackMan software, you can select which type of range ball that you're using, and then when you apply normalization, we will convert the launch conditions to what would the launch condition have been had this been a premium ball, and then run it through the ball flight model. So when is it you're using the TrackMan normalization? Well, one could be that you are on a driving range where it's windy conditions, because when you have a wind, let's say that you're doing a driver fitting and you are hitting into a 20 miles per hour headwind. You don't want to get fitted for a perfect driver hitting into a 20 miles per hour headwind. So what you can do with the normalization is when you normalize the data, essentially it plays it through the aerodynamical model, and that is running without any wind. And that means you get the best representation. What would this trajectory have been like had there been no wind? And this gives you, together with the ball conversion, a unique possibility that even you don't have the premium balls like you normally play when you play real golf on the golf course, you can now take this range ball and convert to a premium ball, and it might even be windy, and you can still get fitted to the right driver for a premium ball in a no-wind conditions. Then there's one thing here, check your baseline distances. This is particular something that tour players are really looking into. They know when they play 1 week, when they play at sea level on the West Coast, that the ball travels not as far as it does when they're up in the altitudes, whether that's in Mexico or the Waste Management Open in Phoenix. They're all aware of this. But what they are really, get a little bit sensitive to is if this is changing outside what they expect, is that because the environmental condition has changed, or it is because I'm swinging it differently than I did last week? And actually, for specific that purpose, a request from tour players, we have created now, this is from the TrackMan Go app, where you simultaneously can look at the actual data. In this case, it's in gray here, side by side by the normalized data. So you can compare, okay, how do I actually hit it? And have I changed my baseline, or is this the same as it was last week? A really appreciated feature. We are just about to release what you're seeing here. We have also now highlighted what you are normalizing to, because you can actually change these things. You can change, first of all, you have the ball type and so on, but you also, and by the way, here's the list of all the ball types available, and you can change the temperature and altitude, because what you normalization is as a player, what is basically what you're used to playing, and we are not all born the same place, so we have different sort of standard conditions we're playing at. But you can change that. That's completely customizable. So to give you a little bit of insight, how much does this matter with normalization on different conditions? How much effect does temperature and altitude have? I have here some data that was recorded actually exactly 1 year ago on the European Tour in Dubai. And this is his actual data. And in the next column here, you will have the normalized data with carry distances at 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. And in the next column, the temperature is increased by 10 degrees Celsius or 18 degrees Fahrenheit, still at sea level. And in the last column here, you have the keeping the temperature still at 25 degrees Celsius, 77 Fahrenheit, but at 1,600 feet altitude. And if you look at the data, which is in this table over here, it's quite interesting to see that if you look at the actual versus normalized data, in this case, this player is achieving 4 to 13 yards longer carry actual than the normalized data. Probably it's a little bit warmer than the 77 degrees Fahrenheit in Dubai. Maybe there was also a little bit of a tailwind here. I think it's also very interesting to see that the difference on the different clubs is actually, there's a big difference between this. So could this be, there could be several reasons. This could be because of the actual speed spin rate. It could also be that the wind was maybe a little bit gusty while these shots were taken. If we look at solely what is the influence on the temperature, what happens when you, for this player, increase by 18 degrees Fahrenheit? The carry distance increased by 3 to 6 yards, longer carry across the clubs. Little bit of, if you look at this, there's a little bit of difference, a little bit longer on the longer clubs compared to the approach irons. If you change the altitude from sea level to 1,640 feet, keeping the temperature the same, you get actually a little bit more longer carry, 4 to 8 yards. Again, if you look at the differences here, there seems to be the biggest difference is actually, in this case, a 3-wood off the tee. So this tells you a little bit about what does the environmental conditions do to the ball. And the root cause to this, just so you know, it's all about the density of the air. Air, you think of this as something that is not there, but there's actually molecules that the ball has to penetrate. The more molecules in the same, the higher density in the same volume, the more resistance, you will hit it shorter and you will get less impacted by your spin rate. That's basically it. So how does TrackMan then? I just told you that a TrackMan mantra is to track the ball flight all the way. So let me explain to you how we actually are tracking the ball all the way. I have here on the in this plot here the raw radar data completely unprocessed, where you have time going this way and you have velocity or speed going this way. So what you can see here is a high speed here, very strong, and then deaccelerating, and you can't see the scale down here, I think, but this is a little bit more than 6 seconds. So this is the entire ball flight. We have a super clear signal of the entire golf trajectory. So together with this, we have then inside TrackMan, there are multiple receivers, and that will, by correlating basically the delay from one receiver to another, we can determine both the vertical angle and the horizontal angle to the ball. And that means that together with the velocity and the distance measurement, I'll come back to what that is, we actually have the entire trajectory. You see from the side, the green, there's actually X's, which is the raw data points. And then you see, might be a little bit difficult, but a smoother line going through. The smoother line is what you see on the applications. The blue line here is then the top-down trajectory. So in this case, a little bit of a baby draw type of shot. So all the way tracked, and as you can see, all the way until it hits the ground. And the beauty of this is only radar tracking. The beauty of the radar tracking is that this is completely independent on the weather conditions. I mean, it can be bright sunlight, it can be in the middle of the night, it can be fog, rain, snow, what have you. And as just to prove, as an example, you see here in the lower left corner, this was the European Tour. They had a shootout in the Canary Wharf in London in the middle of the night, where we were tracking the shots hitting to a target green, actually in the middle of the Thames. So that's the beauty about the radar, is that it's completely independent about the weather conditions. It's so robust, it just always works. It's also the reason why military uses primarily radar for tracking things like projectiles and missiles and so on. So what about then the club delivery and the ball launch? Well, for that purpose, we have another radar, a high-resolution radar, where the one tracking the entire ball flight is what we refer to the long-range radar or the ball flight tracking radar. And this works in conjunction with the built-in camera. And let me explain to you how that works. Again, here we have a spectrogram. In this case, it's a very, very zoomed in time. So this piece here, where you see the club, is about 30 milliseconds. So what you see is actually the club coming in here, impacting the ball. You see the ball speed up here. In fact, if you look close, you can see that you can actually see in the radar data, because of the very, very high sampling frequency, we are sampling at 40,000 times a second. You can actually see the ball accelerating while the ball is in contact with the club face. Because of transferring energy from the club head to the ball, then the club head speed is abruptly reduced, and you see the continuation of the club head here. There's also a reflection coming from the shaft, not something that we are using for anything, but it's just there, and actually we're making sure that we are not misinterpreting this as being some of the other things that we actually want to track. What's quite interesting, I think, when you look at this, and this is really where you see the beauty of using this high resolution radar, is if you look up here, you can sort of see the signal prior to impact separating into like two chunks here. And this is because when you have a golf club that comes in impacting the ball, and we have the TrackMan standing maybe 7 feet behind the player, then because of the closure rate of the club, the toe will move faster than the heel. And this is actually the separation you are seeing here. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but if in average there is from far heel to far toe, there is 12 to 14% difference in club speed. So you might have 100 miles per hour in the center of the club face, and then it's 93 at the far heel and 107 at the far toe. So we do the tracking here in both in velocity here. We have multiple receivers, so we can determine the angles. So we three-dimensionally can track this, and we also transmitting multiple frequencies. And by doing that, you can actually determine what is the absolute distance, what is the how far away is the club and the ball at any point in time. And then we have added in TrackMan 4 a high-resolution camera. And what is so nice about this camera, you might have noticed if you look in front of the TrackMan, it says next to the camera, radar synchronized. And that means that every frame we are taking here, just prior to impact, actually a few post-impact also, we know exactly, that's this yellow line, where in the radar data these images are taking. And that means that we can now, together with the radar data, we can now use the camera data and get pixel accurate in determining the exact outline of the club head as well as the shaft in multiple frames. And one of the ways we are using this is, for example, to determine the impact location. Because the impact location is such a measurement where you actually need to have, millimeter accuracy. And this we achieve in this way that we are tracking the club head in these frames. And then we have, this is an earlier frame in the downswing where there is a clear view from the radar to the ball. And we can super accurately determine exactly where is the ball located prior to impact. And it doesn't move until the clubs come down. And then we're using the radar data that tells us exactly when time of impact occurs, because that will always happen between two frames. And essentially, we're using this time from the radar data to, you can say, interpolate between these frames and say, okay, well, how would that club head how would that be located exactly at the time of impact? So imagine that you had a transparent club head on top of this, showing where would the club head outline be located at time of impact. And this is the reason why, which for many has been counterintuitive, how can TrackMan determine where the impact location happened? It sits behind the ball. The club must be occluding the ball at time of impact. Yes, correct, it does. But we have this frame, actually many frames, where we have a clear sight to the ball, so no problem. So that's why we can get these things like impact location. We call this combination of using radar data and camera data for optically enhanced radar tracking. And I've indicated that the radar is like in 4D. That might sound a little bit strange, but we basically have both velocity and we have X, Y, Z. On the camera, which is a plane, it is a 2D tracking, but since the radar gives us the depth information, we can use the camera data to enhance the 3D measurements of the radar, optically enhanced radar tracking. And we use OERT, as we call it, in many of our applications, for many of our measurements. Impact location, just talked about that. Short game is, tracking the club head, being able to give accurate readings of attack angle and club path. It's only possible because of OERT. It in generally also helps us tremendously when you are hitting balls of natural turf, where actually the divot, especially for the wedges and more lofted clubs, will sort of, on the radar data alone, negatively affect the readings. By OERT, that's no longer a problem at all. Performance putting, where we are tracking both the club head and the ball with both the camera and the radar. And also, finally, utilizing the measured impact location to reflect an accurate spin axis, even if you don't hit it out in the center. It's particularly important for drives when you hit it out on the toe or on the heel. We also measure the spin rate. And this is maybe one of the things this was the first patent that TrackMan got, which I'm actually most proud of, and is a super accurate measurement. There is by far the state of the art. Nothing even comes close to the accuracy of the TrackMan spin rate measurement. We're talking about an accuracy of less than 15 RPM. And the way we do that is, again, we look at the spectrogram I have here of the raw radar data, and then you have the ball here, and then you can see there are sort of symmetric parallel lines on either side of the ball trace here. The clever thing is that, and that's what the pattern is all about, is that these side bands, as we call them, are exactly spaced the spin frequency of the ball. So by determining this distance between these lines, we know exactly what the spin rate is. When you're outdoors, like this example is here, we don't require any kind of marking on the ball to see that. There will be more than enough energy because we observe the ball during such a long time. We typically measure the spin rate for the first second. So in fact, we measure the spin decay in the beginning. However, indoors, when you're hitting into a screen, you most often need to put a metallic dot on the ball in order to see to have enough strength in these side bands to measure the spin rate. One of the new things that's coming here, and we're coming with a new firmware here in, I think we're going to be in 2 or 3 weeks, is that we have upgraded our spin measurement algorithm that we used to require 2 full revolutions of the ball indoors in order to measure the spin rate. And that, of course, is a challenge if you have very high speed and you have a low spin. But now, with the new updated spin algorithm, we only require to see 1 revolution of the ball. And in turn, that means that we're now talking about a required ball flight distance of only something like 7 to 8 feet. And this is even true even if you're 170 miles per hour and 2,000 RPM, 2,500 RPM player. So that's a big achievement. We have also, in the same release, will come with the situations where you don't measure the spin rate, we have increased the accuracy of the estimated spin rate actually to a level where it's for normal use, simulator use, and so on. You really almost don't require to use measured spin unless you are, to a pro. But of course, when you are getting fitted and serious teaching and so on, you do want to measure the spin all the time. So in summary, the tracking solution, the tracking technology of TrackMan is a dual radar. We have 2 radars, a long range and a short range, with OERT, optically enhanced radar tracking. And it's really a marriage of the best of the 2 worlds. I've listed here what is it that really what we're using the radar for. First of all, radar is the only thing that can give you this full ball flight tracking, even out to 400 yards, if that's what you're capable of. It has a superior velocity or speed measurement. I mean, that's directly the signal we are seeing is directly the speed, unmatched. Has a superior range accuracy also, where this technique of transmitting multiple frequency is a super accurate way to determine what is the depth, how far away from the unit is the ball. That's something that is extremely hard with a camera to see basically how far away it is. You're going to look at the size of a ball, whether that's a fraction of a pixel higher or bigger or smaller. Very, very inaccurate. And then the radar has this beautiful thing that is completely independent of the environment, come snow, hail, fog, or sunlight, or in the middle of the night. Super robust. The extreme high sampling rate for getting things like time of impact and whatever events that require you to have a very, very precise time measurements. Radar provides that. And then there's this, I have to say again, I'm super proud of the spin accuracy that we are having. No other technology does that. On the other hand, the camera provides us with this, pixel accuracy on tracking both the club and the ball. And that is absolutely necessary for detailed things like impact location and some of the putting things. We wouldn't be able to do that without this, like dynamic lie also, which we also have for the full swing. And then radar has one disadvantage is you can't see this with your eyes, and that makes many people question how does the radar really work, and really don't understand this. The beauty about the camera is you can look at the image and you can relate to that image because this is what you see with your eyes. So, and we've actually incorporated, I'll come with an example with that later, that this video we are using for the OERT, this impact video, that's actually available directly, so you can look at it in the UI, because it might be so that if you get an impact location that tells you are 10 millimeter on the toe and you somehow don't feel that's right and you think TrackMan might be wrong, well, you can verify by looking in this impact video, TrackMan is actually really right. So this is a super good way of doing that. That's one of the advantages cameras has. And then a camera also has the beauty that it can track or detect things that doesn't move. I explained to you how we are doing it with the ball sitting on the tee, or if it was on the ground, how we can very accurately determine exactly what is the location of that. We also use it when we are pointing out the target line in the camera, basically, the way this can be achieved is because we have calibrated the camera exactly to the coordinate system of the radar. So whenever you click on a pixel in the camera, we know exactly where that is in the radar coordinate system. And there's actually other things that we are not only exploring, but you will see coming from TrackMan added to the TrackMan 4 that takes advantage of measuring these things that doesn't move. But you have to be a little bit patient before we reveal that. I don't want to step, so that was all about TrackMan, how we track at TrackMan. Now I want to step a little bit, back and say, okay, indoor measurement technology. What is, if you're considering to invest in that, what is it that you should think of? First of all, as I mentioned before, the accuracy of the ball flight modeling and the launch condition is absolutely critical, because reality stops after these 10 feet of ball flight or whatever the distance is. And that means that you have to have these launch conditions, ball speed, launch angle, launch direction, spin rate, spin axis, needs to be super accurate. And there are certain tolerances that it has to meet this. If it doesn't meet this, it won't work for you. For using the technology also for teaching and fitting, you also want to have accurate club data. And I would, again, especially for teaching tool, I would say having an integrated video analysis tool is also a must-have these days. And regarding the accuracy, I would like to share with you how we're looking at this at TrackMan. We have a term that we call actionable data. And what that means is that when you have actionable data, you can make objective recommendations that will impact a player's performance. And our take on this is what is required in order to do that is, in order to get a true ball flight, you need as an absolute minimum to meet these accuracy requirements, in our opinion. This is not reflecting the TrackMan accuracy. We are much better than this, but this saying as an absolute minimum, you have to have this. In order to be used for teaching and fitting, in addition, you need to have the club delivery numbers meeting at least these tolerances indicated here. And how did we get to those numbers? Well, one thing is what, first of all, with the typical ranges that you see of these parameters. A second thing is, what is it that we see of difference from, from club to club, from player to player, and what is the consistency of players? And of course, at the end of the day, it's also what is the sensitivity if I change my ball speed 1 mile per hour? What impact will that have on my total trajectory, where the ball will land, etc., etc. So combining all those together, this is how we have reached this level. I will say, if you're a lead player, like tour players, equipment manufacturers, then you are requiring much tighter tolerances for many of the parameters than I'm listing here. And I can tell you that TrackMan 4 comfortably meets all these requirements. So this is an absolute must in order to have a true ball flight and to be able to use it for teaching and fitting. But there are other things that are important, maybe are often overlooked. I talked about the accurate ball flight modeling, but the second thing here is that outliers must be extremely seldom. And think about, if you have a teaching session about 30 minutes, then you have so many shots. And if you have outliers here and there and needs to see a number of shots before you can really figure out what this player is doing, and when you then do a change and so on, if you get these outliers here, that means that you can't really get efficient with using this. And that's why we also have a mantra at TrackMan saying no bad data. We would much rather put out an empty data tile rather than have running the risk of putting a number that might not be within our tolerances. So we're really tough on ourselves on that one. You also need to not all the time come out with blank numbers, so you need to have a high pickup rate. So balancing those two requires the right hardware and the right algorithms for doing that. And then there are these things that are and before you really try this on your own body, so to speak, then you don't really appreciate the importance of these things, ease of use. But if it's only so that you can achieve these accuracies we had on the previous slide in some very controlled conditions that doesn't match the daily work, how you're going to use this, then it's not of much use. Also, again, coming back to the example of you have maybe 30 minutes with your clients. If you have to mark the clubs they bring in order before you get efficient, and we've just been hitting some 6 irons, I want to see your drive also. Oh, wait a second, I need to mark up your club. I mean, that doesn't work. What if you have a lefty coming in and you need to spend precious time on swapping where the equipment needs to be positioned, how it needs to be aligned, and so on. Large hitting area. Have the flexibility to move a little bit around. In particular important when you're outdoors on natural grass, when you take divots, every single shot will be hit from a new location. So if you have to spend time of moving the equipment, realigning it, and so on, you end up not using it in the natural environment. And speaking about easy alignment, that needs to be bulletproof and super, super accurate. So, and then the last thing is, if you are in a situation where you would like to be able to travel with your equipment, or be able to relocate maybe winter, summer, or if you have this in your home, even that you might want to at some point get a new house, it needs to be something that you can actually easily take with you. And the most extreme version of that is if you have an indoor simulator and you also want to take your device with you to the range. If this is fixed to the ceiling or something, you can't do that. With the TrackMan 4, you just pick it up, go to the range. When you come back, you just put it down. And if you have a screen, you can use our auto calibration feature, and you're ready to go in seconds. Very, very often overlooked key points for daily use of using a measurement launch monitor technology. So now I'm going to show a little bit about what we have been doing in the last year and what's coming in 2021. These are firmware updates on the TrackMan 4. So what we have done in 2020 is we have made a 2.0 release, and that has created a significant accuracy and pickup improvement. This was actually by the extensive use of using neural network and machine learning on the camera and the radar data. We have, as I mentioned before, updated our aerodynamics, which is benefiting both the normalized and the indoor ball flight rendering. We also have, and this is again the neural network that has created that, become basically insensitive to the flickering light. That used to be a problem with using the tracking technology. That also happens when you're outdoors. If you have a shadow, if you have the sun on your back, so you have a shadow sort of moving over the ball while you're swinging, that used to be a little bit problematic for the TrackMan 4, but not anymore. And then we introduced the Putting 2.0, of which I've shown a screenshot from the TrackMan Go application here with, and the reason we call it 2.0, now it's with club data, it's with path, it's with attack, it's with face angle, tempo, and so on. A lot more also on the ball, brakes, slope percentages, etc. In 2021, as I said, there's a new firmware coming here in a few 2-3 weeks. And this includes this reduced footprint requirement for the indoor use. I'll actually come with a detailed slide on this just after this one here. There's also a club speed accuracy improvement. This is particular for those who are, I would say, plus 100 miles per hour. This quest for speed that we have seen unfold here in 2020 and seems to continue in 2021 made us aware that there was a part of the region where we were testing the accuracy of the system that we could actually improve. That's part of this release also. And then we've done a whole lot on this whole simulator experience. So it's sort of not only geared to track good golf shots, but also can take more not so good golf shots, and also including putting and very short chip shots. So significant update there. And then there are more things coming, which I cannot reveal or will not reveal right now, but that will be pretty exciting, I would say. So you have to be patient for that. Regarding the reduced footprint, as I said, we are now down to only one revolution of the ball before it hits the screen, which means that we are down to something like 7.5 feet of ball flight requirement. We have also reduced the distance from the TrackMan unit to where you actually launch the ball from. So you can actually use it all the way down to 6 feet. That does mean that your, you can say, left-right hitting area gets smaller. But if you are in tight spaces, and this means in total that you can get down to 15.5 feet in total wall-to-wall measurements, taking into account that the depth of the TrackMan is not, indefinitely thin, as well as having a little bit of a 1 foot of buffer behind the screen, so to take the impact of the ball. So even in 15.5 feet, and I have an example of this here, where you have 2.6 yards last data, so basically 7.5 or slightly more than 7.5 feet, and with a ball speed of 174 miles per hour, perfectly tracking spin rates here, in this case, 2,600 RPMs. So a big update for many of the tight places. That has been a limitation of TrackMan in the past. So then I talked earlier about this impact video, and bear with me, this is actually myself a couple of days ago hitting a shot, and maybe I'm getting a little bit rusty, but you can easily see from this impact location, which I also saw in my app, is that I was hitting it out on the toe. So you can see my club here really hitting it out on the toe. So the face angle, the red arrow here, the actual orientation of the face at impact points pretty much straight out to the right, meaning that I, in this case, have a face to path of plus 4.2 degrees. Normally, that would actually be a pretty big slice, but because of the gear effect working the other way around, this ends up having a spin axis of only 2 degrees, which means this is more or less just a straight push out to the right, even though this has nothing to do with the path to do, so to speak. This is because of my impact location solely. So, and this is available in both the Go as well as in the TPS app. So I think if you look at TrackMan 4, which was born in 2016, and already when the TrackMan 4 was born in 2016, it was basically state of the art on the market. And then over the years, we have added feature by feature, improving things, taking more advantage of the hardware that we built in there. We knew that we would do that, and we are not done yet. So the 2021 TrackMan 4 is basically a revolution compared to a 2016 TrackMan 4, and we ain't done yet. This was actually my presentation. So now we will have a very, very short break. We'll try to keep this lower than 60 seconds. I'll put on some chairs here. Have my colleague Niklas Bergdahl join me. So stay tuned for a little bit, and then we'll be back with a Q&A.